Okay, today we have to demo a 5.3 feature that's coming out named Schematic. I myself, Colin, am here, and I have.
Hi, I'm Paul.
And Paul is one of the principal gameplay programmers that we have on an internal project. And pretty much what we're going to look at is something named Schematic. And Schematic has been used for quite a while internally. And maybe you could talk about how it started and came about.
Yeah, sure. So, the initial drive when I first started on Schematic was just to try and help internal projects like Hunt to, offload some of the work from programmers onto designers so that we can A, prototype ideas quickly, and B, take those ideas through to final production so that we're not having to develop things which eventually get thrown away. These are things that can be polished to a certain extent.
And from my understanding, Schematic is a graphing implementation similar to FlowGraph. So maybe how does FlowGraph differ from Schematic?
So there is no hard and fast rule, but in my perspective, FlowGraph is there as a very high level scripting tool for levels. So it's this entity has moved into this area, we trigger this cutscene, that kind of thing. Whereas Schematic is building those individual little entities and then doing the sort of fine grained control of those things. So that's the player entity can be built with Schematic, the camera, that kind of thing. Okay. The things that were traditionally done in C++.
Well, maybe we can get into it. First, we can show where it's found inside of the editor, and then we can go over the basic interface of Schematic and how it works.
Yeah. So begin. So if you look under Tools, we now have this new panel called Schematic. The Schematic Viewport, the bulk of the editing will go on inside here, which is the graph view. Mm-hmm. We also have a tree view here, which you'll soon see gets built up, and this is the elements that make up, like everything in Schematic is a class, basically, or is inside a class. Mm-hmm. So a class can represent an entity. Moving forward, it might represent other objects, but for now, what we really care about is entities.
So does this, as it goes on, replace Lua in some ways?
Yes, actually, I would say in terms of feature parity and things, it's closer to Lua than it is to FlowGraph, yes. Okay. Yeah.
And when you say a class, so you have constructors and destructors, and you're able to actually have how it processes the events and then triggers.
Yeah, kind of. It is, again, it's perhaps for newcomers a little bit sort of a different approach. It's much closer to a sort of programmer's approach. But mm-hmm. that also has its advantages because these are proven concepts and they're well understood.
Okay, so maybe we can get into it and start building a basic graph and see where we go.
Yeah, so what I wanted to do to start with was just build a very simple entity. I'm going to call it a campfire. So we create a class, give it a name.
Excellent.
And to begin with, what you get is we have the base here. So every object that you create in Schematic is derived from something that's already been declared in C++. Okay. So the base of this is an entity object. And by default, they have what we call a construction graph. This is something that you run when the object is first created. Mm-hmm. And then we have a signal graph. Examples of signals, we have some by default here. So start will trigger when the entity is created, stop when it's destroyed, and update will trigger every frame.
So it's every frame. Okay.
Yeah, we will have more fine-grained control over that, but right now, yes, it's just a constant tick. Okay. And so the thing that really gives you the power and the functionality is then we add components to our class.
All right.
So I will start by adding a very simple component called a geometry component. And now that we have this geometry, we can
come over to
file name.
Properties panel.
Yes, I should have explained that actually. But everything you edit either inside this tree view or actually inside the graph as well should have some properties, and they will appear in this properties panel.
Okay.
So I'll just select some nice pretty geometry.
It's amazing. Did you make that geometry?
No, sadly not. That's stolen from another project. We can actually see this in the preview window now.
Nice.
And we can go to perspective, and we can actually create the object as well. So under create object entities, we now have a new category called schematic, and we'll see our campfire. So we can just drag that in.
Okay.
So that in itself is a little bit boring. So I guess the next thing we want to do is
You want to light it on fire.
exactly, yes. So we'll add a light component. Again, we have a bunch of properties, so we'll give it a color, something kind of orangey, I guess. Up the diffuse multiplier.
And are these properties the same as a basic entity that you would have outside of schematic? Or are these properties specific to schematic itself? I'm trying to understand how it derives from it.
Some of them are shared. Some of them we've kind of done specific to schematic, where a lot of the functionality that we are now releasing with schematic has come over from the Hunt project, where we've kind of tried and tested it, but it's not an exact fit. So what we're doing now is we're taking the things that we developed for Hunt and sort of cleaning them up, simplifying them, making them nice for users to just get started with, making them a bit more user-friendly.
Gotcha.
So yeah, there is no one-to-one comparison with existing things. We're just doing what seems best and what's the best fit.
Okay.
This is an opportunity for a clean start, I guess, in some ways. So we have a light component now, and what we can actually do is we can give that just a little gizmo, so we can actually move that off the ground a little bit. If we switch back to perspective, we now see there's a light in place. We can also give it some particles, so that's another component, particle emitter.
And just for my reference, when you say particles, can you actually reference the old particle effect library, or is this only in PFX 2?
This is, so far as I know, all of the particle effects. Okay. So the new ones and the old ones.
So it supports legacy.
Yes.